Good evening, Liberty Baptist Church family, and thank you for tuning in Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. The last 5 Wednesday nights or so, we've been doing what we've called interactive family service. We've had a good time with singing and children's time and Bible messages and some fun and some questions and some games. And as we were praying and talking with the staff about our Wednesday night over the next week or two, we decided to use this as an opportunity where we could bring some people in on a Wednesday night to address our church and to learn from that we might otherwise not be able to, because normally they would be having their regular Wednesday night service and we would be on our property. And so we're going to use, hopefully, the magic of technology. Along with the magic of technology sometimes are the frustrations of technology. And so this is the first time we've done something like this, and we'll see how it goes. We believe it'll go well. We've asked Pastor Bill Prater and Pastor Tyler Prater, both from Liberal, Kansas, the city of Liberal, small town there in Kansas, to join us. Pastor Prater was just with us in February. It was a great help to our church. And I had several folks ask, when are we bringing him out again? Well, tonight, we hadn't planned to bring him out this quickly, but tonight is that night. We're bringing he and his son, who serves alongside. They serve together there at Fellowship Baptist. And Tyler, many of our young people know Tyler. He was a guest speaker just a couple of weeks ago for our online youth group. And he's also preached our teen camp a couple of times. And God's used him greatly in the lives of our young people. I know my own children. His ministry and his preaching and his life, they admire and respect him and have been helped by his preaching. And so tonight's going to be a little different. We're calling it Real Life Conversations. And we're going to hit on a variety of topics, some on, I guess you would say, personal, just their upbringing and their testimony, some on the Christian life, some in family and in ministry. And we'll close the interview, the conversation out with them just sharing some Bible thoughts or principles that would be a help to us during this season. And so I'm excited for those that many of you have heard one or both of them. For those that you either haven't heard Pastor Prater, you haven't heard Pastor Bill or Pastor Tyler, one or the other, I'm excited for you to get to meet them and to hear from them. They've been a great example and great friends to me, and I'm excited that our church family gets to hear and be influenced by them. I'm going to turn over and we're going to bring them onto the screen. Can you see and hear me? Pastor Bill, Pastor Tyler?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You guys are good right there. I'm going to start just for folks to get to know a little bit about you. Pastor Bill, would you tell us maybe just your testimony, how you were, where you were born, how you were reached for the Lord? Just give us your testimony in a nutshell there.
Well, I was born right here in Liberal, Kansas in 1960. I was actually raised the first 20 years of my life across the state line in the panhandle of Oklahoma. Liberal happened to be the closest hospital, and so that's where I was born. I was not raised in a Christian family. Both my parents were alcoholics. They weren't anti-God or anti-church. It just wasn't really something that was a part of our lives. Early on, the extent of our church exposure was my mom would dress my brother and I up with new clothes on Easter Sunday and usher us across the alley to the little Methodist church there. But as I began to get into my junior high and early high school years, I began going to different churches with my friends. Honestly, just about anything to get out of the house was what I did. I often joke about whoever was going skating or skiing, then that's where I went to church. Methodist church, they went roller skating, and so you had to go 3 weeks in a row to do that. They had more money, so they went skiing, and you'd have to go to go there. So I went to Church Christ youth camp. I went to Pentecostal church for a while. I went to a lot of churches back when I was, early teen years, early high school years. That's when campus life was a big deal. And there was a place here in Liberal called His Place Coffee House, and we would go there on Sunday nights. Date me a little bit. We'd sing "Reach Out to Jesus." He's reaching out to you, and it only takes a spark to get a fire going. And I don't know how many times I stood in in a circle, holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and got saved. I was actually invited to Fellowship Baptist Church by a friend of mine, and her mom and dad were the lay youth ministry leaders at our church at the time. And she invited me. I remember we rode the bus. Her parents had a bus route there in Tyrone, about 10 miles from Liberal. And I remember riding the bus in. And even as a teenage kid, 16 years old, lost, I remember, even as I'm telling the story, how incredibly impacted I was. The moment I walked into the building, something in me said that you're in a place that's different than any other place you've ever gone. Make a long story short, that was in July of 1976. I got saved in September 8th, 1976, on a Wednesday night. And my brother got saved a year after me. He just celebrated his spiritual birthday. I think I told this story to the church when I was there. We were fortunate to see my mom get saved in a revival meeting at Fellowship Baptist in 1989. And then 25 years after I got saved, I had the opportunity to sit down at the kitchen table with my dad, 2001, and lead him to the Lord. Amen. And that's my story.
Amen. So you were reached through the bus ministry of the church that you know, Pastor.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And I believe this was the last Easter where you're the lead pastor, and Tyler, is that right? There's a date where you're taking over. You've already been voted in. Is that right, Tyler?
Yes, sir. The church has already voted to confirm that, and we did that at the beginning of this year. And the first Sunday of August will be his last Sunday, and my first as the pastor.
So if this shutdown lasts much longer, your first Sunday as pastor, you're going to have grown the church to 0 gathering in the auditorium there.
Easter was really how I had planned my last Easter as pastor. Not only did we not have services, I didn't even preach. So it was kind of a bummer.
I got thinking about it. You said your first experience with church was getting dressed up and going to church on Easter. Your last Easter as lead pastor of Fellowship, you weren't even in church. You weren't able to go to church.
Well, crazy. First Easter since I got saved.
Wow.
I haven't been. And I'm sure that's a story for a lot of people.
Sure. Tyler, what about you? Tell us your testimony.
I got saved as a 7-year-old boy, and by all accounts, my testimony is less dramatic than my dad's, but I think his was dramatic, so mine didn't have to be. And I'm thankful so much that in a lot of ways my testimony of coming to Christ is just the opposite of my dad's. He was raised in an alcoholic home. I was raised in a godly home. His parents sent him to church. My parents took me to church. I remember, I don't know what the date was exactly. I know I was 7 years old, and I remember the Lord had been convicting me of my sin for a while, and I walked back to my dad's bedroom. Him and my mom were laying in bed watching TV, and God had got a hold of my heart. When I was walking down the hall, I was crying. I was always tenderhearted and sensitive to the Lord, but man, it was real. And just told my dad I want to get saved, and so he got out of bed and came to the foot of the bed, and the only Bible that he had handy was one of them old school big family Bibles, the full color Bibles. And so he turned to John 3:16. Couple other scripture passages, and then we just prayed together at the foot of his bed. And what's really neat about both of us being able to give our testimony is that I am an indirect result of somebody that cared enough to invite a teenager to church. And for the teenagers that are listening to this, even the adults that are listening to this, you have no idea how one invitation to church might affect generations for years. And so my dad was saved, and then I was saved. My brother was saved. My sister was saved. My son hope that his kids will get saved, and you can all be traced back to one person that cared enough to invite a teenage boy to church, and bus workers that cared enough to go pick him up every week, a pastor that cared enough to love him, a youth pastor that cared enough to disciple him. You just have no idea how that one invitation might change an entire family for generations or forever.
Amen. And then, of course, it's God's work in your family, but through the ministry of your dad and now your ministry, not just impacting generations of one family, but literally thousands of people around the world through missions, through the ministry of fellowship, and to God be the glory.
Amen.
That's wonderful. How long have you been married, Pastor Prater?
39 years in June.
And 3 children, correct?
3 children, yes, sir, and 7 grandkids.
7 grandkids. Are there any on the way or no?
Nope.
Wow.
Not.
Got 7 right now. And then Tyler, how long have you been married?
Nearly 14 years this coming summer, and we've got 1 kid. His name is Kevin.
And you said he's 9 years old?
9 years old.
What's his favorite thing to do? What does he like?
He likes playing sports, anything with the ball.
Okay. What's the number one sport?
Basketball is definitely his number one sport, but he's playing baseball right now. He loves that too.
Okay, I was going to say he's going to be in trouble with his uncle. His uncle Kilby plays Major League Baseball, so when he hears basketball's the favorite, he might be in a little trouble there.
They're right now, Kelby's home, and so they're enjoying some time together. They go to Diamond quite a bit together. He can play catch, so it's cool.
Nice little resource to have there for have a Major League ball player in the family to teach your son, huh?
It's fun.
That's awesome. And so you've been, obviously, Tyler, you've been at Fellowship your whole life.
Yes, sir.
Pastor Prater, tell us, you were saved there, went to college, right out of college. Did you go back on full-time vocational ministry there?
I did. 1981, Katie and I got married in June, and that's when I started. I actually started on the staff before we got married, and I started as music director and janitor.
Okay. And how long were you a staff member?
I was a staff member until May of 2000.
So about 19 years?
Served the first 9 years or 10 years, first 10 years as youth pastor as well as music, and then got more into adult ministry at that point, became the associate, and then took over the lead pastor position in May of 2000.
And so about 20 years close to it as a staff member and 20 years as the lead pastor, basically. About 40 years of ministry there at Fellowship. That's wonderful. And Tyler, you've been on staff there how long?
Going on 14 years.
Okay.
This summer, I've served as a youth pastor and a music director, and now the associate pastor and co-pastor for the last 7 years.
In August, you'll become lead pastor in August. I preached there last year, and just a wonderful church, wonderful spirit, amazing place. Tyler, tell us a little bit about Liberal, Kansas. Population, just paint a picture for a minute or so of the town so people can get an idea.
Yeah, to you guys out in the West Coast, Liberal, if you were to come into Liberal, you would not be impressed at all. Probably. It's a very ordinary place, very rural place. We have about 20,000 people in our community. It has changed a lot over the years. It hasn't grown in number a ton over the years. It has changed in demographic. We are nearly 70% Hispanic in our county, and that's due in large part to the fact that we have the 3rd largest beef packaging plant in the world right here in Liberal, Kansas. In fact, a third of the leather on every Nike shoe comes from our plant in Liberal, Kansas. They kill nearly 6,000 head of cow a day at that plant alone. And so it's a big part of our community, big part of our economics here. And it's a very ordinary town. Our church is made up of very ordinary blue-collar people, from farmers to insurance agents to plumbers to contractors to truck drivers, just a bunch of ordinary people that God's brought together. But our town is very rural compared to Newport Beach, California.
And about 20,000 people there. I can vouch for the meat packing plant. I smelled it as I drove down the downtown. You can smell that there, and um, a town of 20,000 that Lord has used them and has blessed, and their church is the largest church in town and truly making a major impact in that city. I went to eat several times while I was there with the Praters. Every restaurant they walk into, people know them, wave with them. Pastor Prater, tell us your second job, if you will, also an area of ministry, not really a job, but what you do to get out in the community and really serve the community.
I work. I'm a fully commissioned police officer for the Liverpool Police Department. Um, started out as just the chaplain, and I won't get into all that big long story. But in 2005, 2004, 2006, I went to the academy, and I've been working as a patrol officer since 2006. Um, it's just a great gig, really. They allow me to make my own schedule. Um, I try to fill in when they call me and ask me, "Hey, can you fill in?" I try to accommodate that because they've been so good to me. But that's been a great area of ministry. Just been a tremendous mission field for me.
Now, Pastor Prater, have you ever had somebody that you've arrested showed up in church, or vice versa, somebody that was in church that you ended up arresting?
I have arrested people for DUI on Saturday, and I have preached to them on Sunday.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Here's
now tell us
that they weren't in their right mind on Saturday. They wouldn't have recognized me on Sunday or anything. So,
they're like, "Hey, you look familiar." I don't know. We've never met. I'm not sure where you saw me from. Tell me, tell us how is that shutdown? How has that shutdown affected Liberal? The shutdown right now. What's going on there in your town?
It has affected the oil field terribly. We've got 2 or 3 men who, not just them, but their fathers, their brothers-in-law, are dependent on the oil field. And I know everybody rejoices in cheap gas, but out here, that's a death knell to many of our families. And when oil hit the negative number yesterday, I mean, it's been devastating to our economy. As far as that is concerned, we've got a lot of small eating places that have been impacted as well. And I know it's the same story everywhere. It's just a devastating thing economically.
Have you had some members that have been laid off or have lost their significant part of their income?
I don't know. My wife had a little part-time job at an optical place, and she was laid off. Others have, they're starting, a lot of places starting to rotate who they bring in during the week, so they're not getting a full week's worth of work. They're just kind of rotating them. But I don't know of anybody beyond that. Like I said, it depends on what this oil thing keeps going down. Then we'll see more of an impact.
Yeah. And are they saying in Kansas when you guys are they starting that phase 1 opening, or when you might be able to try to gather again? Do you guys have any ideas on that yet, or no?
The governor extended the stay-at-home order until May 3rd. We are hoping and praying that she will begin the phase 1 of the reopening process on May 3rd or May 4th, and let us start getting back to some semblance of normalcy. But that's yet to be seen. So many, I won't be political here, but so many of the decisions that have been made based upon numbers from the east side of the state. The further you come west, it's much more rural, but yet, decisions are being made based upon Wichita, Kansas City, Topeka, and it's really affecting us out here in the other side of the state.
Now, Tyler, this whole virus hit home a little closer to you, right? You actually contracted the virus, correct?
I did.
And your wife as well, or no?
My wife, yeah, I was the only one in our family that was officially tested.
Okay.
When I got it, there was one person in our entire county that had tested positive, and that's it. And the reason that nobody else was testing positive is because they weren't letting anybody else get tested. Out in our part of the state, we just didn't have sufficient testing kits, and so you had to be just very, very, very sick for them to consider testing you. And I wasn't the first one in my family that showed symptoms. I was just the first one that got tested. My mom and dad and sister and brother-in-law had already showed symptoms and had fevers. And then I broke out with a fever, and I went to the doctor and told them that my parents and my siblings had the same symptoms and they didn't get tested. And so they decided they were going to test me on behalf of everybody. And if I tested positive, they would deem all the other family members positive. And sure enough, it came back. I was the second case in all of Seward County to test positive. And I think we have over 100 now in our county that are positive. But they just deemed my family to be positive, and they were, and all quarantined, and all the folks that were around me quarantined. And, anyway, we're through that now. I'm recovered, regained strength, and preaching a little bit again, so we're good.
That was, yeah, everybody in the family's back to full strength?
I think so. My wife, who has a compromised immune system, we're really worried about her. She has an autoimmune disease, but God really took good care of her, and she's a little slower in the recovery process. She's not having fevers anymore, but she's coughing quite a bit, and all of us are a little fatigued and tired. It takes a while after your body has ran a fever for 10 straight days or so for it to recuperate, but I think we're doing good.
Good. Well, just a couple more questions as we're getting to know you, and I'm going to jump into a few other questions on the Christian life. But the important question here, the GOATs in basketball, Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Oh, man. I think I can answer this question without any bias at all, because I grew up watching basketball in the 90s. So I had 274 Michael Jordan basketball cards at one time. My dad was a preacher, which meant that we lived in poverty, and I never got a pair of Michael Jordan shoes. Unfortunately, knockoff from Walmart. But I also, my favorite player now is LeBron James, because he was a senior in high school the same year I was a senior in high school. I watched all of his games from his senior in high school all the way till now. So I don't. Both of them are my favorite players. But I think that unbiasedly between those two, there's just something intangible about Michael Jordan that you can't touch. And so maybe it's just because I just watched the first 2 episodes of the documentary. I don't know. But I think Michael Jordan still is the best player to ever play. But I must say that I love LeBron, and he's my favorite player right now.
There you have it, folks. That was like a politician. You gave a great case for both sides. But you didn't give an actual answer. What would you say to Pat?
Jordan is the GOAT.
You did give an answer which a politician won't do. So, what would you say? What would you say? You know, our youth pastor Ryan and Pastor Sammy. What would you say to those guys that try to say Kobe is the GOAT? What would you tell them when they say that?
Kobe is a copycat. Now, I feel bad because the guy who passed away just, 2 months ago or whatever. So I feel insensitive. But honestly, even Michael Jordan said that Kobe copied every one of his moves. And that's why we call Kobe like the closest to Jordan, because he had the mid-range game. He had tried to copy his killer instinct, his competitive edge, and his work ethic, just like a smaller Jordan. So He wasn't better than Jordan. He wasn't the GOAT. He just copied the GOAT.
I think we probably should have I shouldn't have asked that question. I should have reminded Tyler everyone he's talking to lives within 15 minutes of Los Angeles.
Well, I'm over 1,000 miles away, so they can't hurt.
That's funny. All right, Pastor Prater, favorite sports team?
OU Sooners.
Yeah.
Boomer Sooner.
The Sooners. Favorite restaurant? Either one of you. Is there a favorite restaurant?
Anything barbecue, not Yankee barbecue. They don't do barbecue well. But I love barbecue. It's my favorite. Other than that, probably Texas Roadhouse. I love a good steak.
All right. Tyler?
Cheesecake Factory is probably my favorite.
How far do you have to drive to get to a Cheesecake Factory?
4 hours.
4 hours.
Have your people Liberal Kansas on a map.
What? Either one of you have a hobby? What's a hobby?
For your law enforcement guys in the church, don't hate me for this, but I mean, copping is not it's not my first priority. So it serves kind of as a hobby for me. Other than that, probably cycling. I like riding my bicycle.
Tyler?
I officiated high school basketball around the area for about 12 years. I don't do much of that anymore. Now that my son's old enough to play sports, I think my hobby is coaching him. I coach him in everything he plays in and enjoy that.
That's awesome. Moving into the Christian life and just some thoughts and questions. Pastor Prater, what would you describe as some of the highlights or the greatest joys of your life in ministry, in Christianity or in vocational ministry?
Life-wise, honestly, it has been the joy of my heart and my wife's heart to see what God has done in Tyler's life. We knew early on, from the time he was 6 years old or so, that he was destined for ministry. He could sing lights out at 6 years old. He just was at home on the platform. And then, just to see where God has brought him and what God is using him to do and has used him to do, has just honestly been the joy of our heart. We love all our kids. That goes unsaid. But Tyler, and getting to hand the torch to him in a couple of months is going to be just an incredibly wonderful experience. Ministry wise, and maybe that crosses over a little bit into ministry, but really my ministry to law enforcement has probably been the highlight of my ministry. Getting to lead our chief of police to the Lord when he was still chief of police. Just getting to see getting to lead different men and their families to the Lord. That's my mission field. That's where God has put me. And ministry-wise, that is just been an incredible experience for me. They're a subculture all their own. You don't get close to law enforcement people easily. God has just given me favor among them, and he just keeps putting one on the hook at a time, it seems like, and we do our best to reel them in.
Amen. Now, you mentioned, Pastor Prater, one of the greatest joys of your life, obviously, is to see, as 3 John 4, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in the truth. You've served together side by side right next to your son for 14 years, which is incredible and is great. But with adult children, for those that maybe have adult children, undoubtedly, there have been some things that Tyler and his wife have chosen to do, or ways that maybe they raise their family, or just quirks or whatever. What would you say has been the key to you guys being able to work together that closely to maintain your mutual respect and to let, as an adult, as parents of adults, let them, have that influence in their lives, but also let them be adults. Was that a learning curve, and how did God guide you and your wife through that?
Wow, that's hard to answer.
I think that what he's done a good job at is is he knows where and how to draw the line between staff member and son. And I'd like to think I've been able to follow his example in that as well. And so he knows when he's my pastor, he knows when he's my father. And I would even say, Dad, that there's probably a line for friend now, to where we're just buds. And it seems like God has given us wisdom along the way to navigate the times when he needs to step in and be my dad, he needs to step in and be my boss and my pastor, and then when he just comes alongside of me, he's my friend. And I don't know if there's a handbook that you could write to navigate all those lines, other than the fact that you just walk in the Spirit and you walk in wisdom. And I think he's done a good job at that. That's why for 14 years we've had a blast, an absolute blast, and have been effective together, because God has allowed each of us in our own on both sides of those lines to just walk in wisdom and just put on different. He knows when to wear the friend hat. He knows when to wear the pastor hat. He knows when to wear the dad hat. And he's done all of those simultaneously in wisdom.
Pastor Prater, that's a some great thoughts, Tyler. Pastor Prater, not just with Tyler and that relationship there, but with your 3 adult children as they got married, and again, I'm looking at it. My daughter's about to graduate, so I'm about to enter a new season of parenting adults, and I've heard from others that sometimes is harder than parenting the younger ones. Were there some times where you and your wife saw your adult children, maybe not in bad ways, but just doing things differently, or you might have, and you had to bite your tongue? Was there a learning curve there with maybe some wisdom you might share for those that are going through that?
I can't think of anything major. I guess probably where, the struggles we've had have been from a Grammy and Pawpaw perspective. It's like, hey, ease up a little bit. It's not that big a deal. You need to just chill out a little bit and remember that they're kids. And so, yeah, there've been times that, we thought, I don't know. I don't know about it. I think that was a little hard. I think that was a little harsh, maybe. But really, other than that, Brother Ryan, we have been blessed that our, as adult married children, they have just brought us great joy. Huck is Tiffany and Kelby's oldest son. I think now last count was he's 3 years old, and he's got 16 or 17 Bible verses memorized. And to just see them raising our grandchildren in the Lord it's just incredible. So yeah, I would be dishonest if there weren't times that Katie and I thought, that discipline was a little harsh. Maybe we would have liked to have seen a different decision. But honestly, nothing major.
No. He's soft, Brother Ryan. Unbelievable. It wasn't too harsh when I was 3 years old.
Yeah, it wasn't too hard when he was the dad, right?
Yeah, there's some Grammy and Pawpaws out there that's going to watch this, and they know where I'm coming from.
I heard the quote that said, the reason grandparents and grandkids get along so well is they have a common enemy. And so I'm not sure about that. Like, the kids think it's too harsh and the grandparents think it's too harsh, Tyler, when did you sense the Lord's leading and desire in your life to enter vocational ministry?
Man, I fought it for a while, but I first sensed that God was calling me to preach the summer before my senior year of high school. My brother had already been at a Bible college in Florida playing basketball for a year, and I went there to drop him off, was really impressed with it. And I wanted to do music really bad, and So I already filled out an application, been accepted into that college, and then I go to summer camp, and God begins to work on my heart to preach, and I can even remember just fighting it all week long. I just didn't, the preaching side of it, just I wasn't comfortable with. And I went forward the last night of that summer camp, and my dad came and prayed with me. He said, "What do you want to pray about?" And I said, "I want to surrender my life to the Lord." And he said, "Does that mean you're willing to do anything?" And I told him at the altar, "I'll do anything but preach." And he said, "Then you're not ready to surrender your life to the Lord." And he said, "Kindly, you just go back to your seat." And so I went back to my seat and just began to wrestle with the Lord for months about that. I'd spend time at the foot of my mom and dad's bed, just asking all kinds of questions about it. And I'm so thankful for parents that didn't push it on me. It wasn't their idea. They didn't have an agenda. I didn't know that they saw that in me. They never told me they saw that in me. I wanted God to be completely responsible for calling me to preach, and they just answered my questions, and all the while knew what God was doing in my heart. And it was a Sunday night, my senior year of high school, whenever my dad was preaching, and I went forward and gave my life to the Lord to be a preacher. And then he just started changing my heart, man. I'll preach before I sing any day now.
Amen. Pastor Prater, to serve the Lord faithfully for a lifetime, and you've been in the same church, I guess more than 40 years if you count as you were growing up there, but for decades in the same church with the same people, that's going to automatically and naturally include some hurts and trials along the way. And as you're talking to some folks about that have been in maybe in the same church, they've been faithful, but they've been hurt, or is there something you're comfortable sharing, maybe a valley on the church perspective that you and your wife have walked through and difficulties there, and what God taught you, and how you remain faithful through those things?
So many ways, I think Katie and I, sometimes have felt like God's pets, because he's just been incredibly, incredibly good to us. Our church people have been just so supportive. But there is an occasion, I can't even remember how long ago now, when Katie and I were just bitterly betrayed by a deacon and his wife who turned on us and tried to get another deacon family to turn against us, and God intervened and worked that all out. But and mainly it was toward my wife, and I have never seen Katie as devastated as she was. It's just indescribable. The hurt, they had grown up. We were their youth pastors. We'd served the Lord together for a lot of years. And, come to find out, there had been things brewing for a number of years. So what actually happened then was really just the tip of the iceberg. But it was incredibly hurtful. I can't even begin to describe the hurt that betrayal was to both of us, and how devastating it was. And I guess what we have learned from that is the art of forgiveness. It was not easy. It was a struggle, and for me to say that I was angry and bitter, just to say I wasn't, would be totally, incredibly dishonest, because I was angry. I was bitter. I just hurt. I hurt for my wife, and really not so much for me, but for my wife, just to see how unfair they were toward her. And so, just ironically enough, I just shared some of these thoughts with somebody on Sunday afternoon through a text messaging time, and just explain to them a little bit what we've learned with forgiveness, about forgiveness, and honestly, we have seen them They're no longer in our church, but in a small community, you see them at funerals and other things. And I can say honestly that the anger's gone, the bitterness is gone. We can shake hands, we can carry on a conversation. Um, but that took some time.
So to stay faithful, I think that's a great lesson, a great reminder to stay faithful and to keep your joy. If you're going to serve the Lord in any place for any length of time, you're going to have to learn how to forgive.
Yes.
And Paul said that none of these things move me, that I might finish my course with joy. He had to decide, this is not going to get me off course. And I think it's a good reminder for every Christian. There are going to be things that could get us off course and cause us to, what you talked about, bitterness, or maybe quitting on God, or quitting a church, or quitting vocational, whatever it might be. And just that bitterness kind of characterizing our lives and our decisions. And we've got to choose forgiveness.
Well, in the ministry, if you're going to invest in people, love is risky. And if you're gonna pastor people well, you've got to love them, and you got to invest in them. And we did. And in that one instance, in nearly 40 years of ministry, that's the only instance that we have honestly been hurt by church people. Our people have been incredible. And but it was a life-changing experience. It was a growing experience for both of us.
Shifting onto the personal side, walking through valleys and through trials. We mentioned this to our church. It was just a couple of years ago now that your oldest son unexpectedly killed in an accident, left behind a beautiful wife and 3 granddaughters. What would you say to somebody maybe that's walking through grief, or maybe it's bitterness, or handling those things in their lives? How did God sustain you and your wife, and what have you learned from that, and how are you walking through that? And you shared some of that with our church, but maybe in a nutshell for those that might not have been here in that service.
And I wish Katie was here. She has so much wisdom, and has helped so many people along the way, just through her experience. And but I guess if somebody were to say, what's the one thing that you've learned and that you would pass on to others, it would be this: that we've learned, Katie and I both have learned, to focus more on what we have left than what we lost. Early on, we began to realize that we still had 2 kids, and at that point, 6 grandkids that needed us. And I didn't want Tyler and Tiffany to become bitter or resentful toward Katie and I in the death of their brother because it stole their parents and their children's grandparents. And so while we still grieve terribly at the loss of our son, we have really, really tried to focus on what we have left. And that has been really, really helpful for us. It's been good for us. I can talk about God's grace and all of that. I think that's a given. But just from a practical perspective, learning to focus on what you have left more than what you've lost.
Thank you, Pastor Prater. Tyler, what about you? How have you, through that grief, that heartache, that unbelievable incident, how did you walk through that, and how did God work in your life and it has been working in your life through all of that over the last couple of years?
I think the depth of losing a brother or sibling, it's deep, but I don't think it touches the depth of losing a child. But it still hurts. I have never in my life been on that side of tragedy to where we got the phone call. I've always been comforting other people that got the phone call, and so what it did in my life was make me feel deeply the pain that I've helped people walk through without feeling that. And now I've always had sympathy for people, and through this now I can have empathy. And there's a big difference between the two when you're trying to be a blessing to people and help people walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I'd experienced heartache, but I hadn't experienced unexpected, tragic loss like this before. And so now my heart is just softer and more sensitive. I'm more capable of ministering to people and walking with people through deep loss because I've been there. I felt that cycle of shock and then sadness, then frustration, and then shock again, then sadness again, then frustration again, wondering if I'll ever get out of that cycle, and still do as things continually remind me that I don't have a big brother. And so it's just softened my heart. I think God's prepared me to be a better pastor. He would certainly be a better husband, a better father, a better friend.
Some really, really helpful stuff there, man. And I think if I could summarize maybe what you said, Pastor Prater, God has shown you perspective. I can be defined by what I've lost, or I can realize God still has something for me to do and people for me to love. And I think what you're saying, Tyler, is I can look at how this has hurt me, or I can look how God is using this in my life to help others. And those are great because that's true for all of us, right? When and not all of our heartaches, or whoever's watching this heartache, isn't on the same level, and we're not in a race or a comparison of who's been hurt the worst. But whatever their deep valley is, their heartbreak is, they can focus on what will never be the same, or they can say, God, you still have something for me to do. You're not done with me. And what you said, Tyler, they can focus on here's how it hurts me. I'm going to focus on my hurt. Or what you just said was, I can help people I never could have, in ways I never could have helped them before. And just that show, only God's grace can do that, but that shows a tremendous amount of wisdom, grace, and I think it's a great challenge and encouragement for every person that's watching this, that either is walking through something or maybe in the coming days, weeks, or months, because all of us understand that life is full of times of heartache and heartbreak, aren't they? And all of us will walk through those times in this broken world. Moving over, we've talked, I guess we've been going back and forth between Christian life and family and different things, but just a couple more questions and we'll wrap this up. I really appreciate you guys being willing to give us this time. Tyler, going back to family, growing up in your dad's house, your mom and dad, share with those watching maybe one or two key things you learned growing up in a Christian home that you have carried into your home as a husband and father now. Maybe just a couple of key things that you look back, your time growing up in a Christian home, that might be an encouragement to other Christian parents that you saw in your parents that made a huge impact in your life.
Yeah. I saw it in my dad and mom growing up that being a conservative Christian family did not mean that we had to be a boring, weird, disconnected from society family. My dad taught me that you can be a conservative, Bible believing Baptist with convictions and not be mad about it. And that with my dad, there's more caught than taught. He's not the kind of leader that sits you down and gives you the 6-point outline about how to do life. You just kind of got to watch him. And one of the things I caught from him growing up was his spirit and understanding that you can be brothers without being twins. You can go rub shoulders with people out in the community and not be contaminated by all of that. And my dad knew how to have fun and knew how to be serious at the same time. And I think that has impacted me most now as an adult and a parent is to just be real and be authentic in front of my son and model to him and show him that the Christian life, even the conservative Christian life, one that we try to shoot for holiness and separation and convictions, like that is a life still that can be full of joy and happiness and normalcy and connectedness with your community. I wouldn't want a different life at all because my mom and dad have modeled that you can have both at the same time, a life pleasing God and a life that is a blast to live.
That's good. I appreciate that. You're talking to, I don't know who all is going to tune in, but hopefully most of our church family, our faithful folks will be watching this, and maybe some others that are from other churches and other states will hop on as they see it on Facebook or whatever. Pastor Prater, you've been in vocational ministry for a long time. Describe the church member that I think that pleases God and that is an encouragement to the pastor. What would you say are some of the things, just briefly, that make a great church member? I think most of these are probably pretty obvious, but coming from a pastor that's been in ministry for a long time and dealt with a whole lot of different church members, what would you describe a great church member, biblical church member?
You're right. I mean, these are going to be, pretty much no brainers. Faithfulness, the ability to be unoffendable. You're not gonna rub elbows with other sinners 3 times a week without somebody rubbing you the wrong way.
That's a great statement. Say that one more time. That's great.
You're not going to rub elbows with sinners 3 times a week without somebody rubbing you the wrong way, or without you rubbing somebody the wrong way.
Yeah.
That's incredibly important that we learn how to handle offense. Todd and I were just having this conversation this weekend about, how we wish people would understand that when you get offended and when you get hurt, that is not the time that you run away from God or run away from church. That's the time when you draw closer to the Lord and closer to church. I mean, it's a no-brainer when you look at it. Why run away from God when you need Him at a time that's so important? And I think, being involved. Not everybody's a singer, not everybody's a teacher, but nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And, just looking at your ministry when I was there, that was so obvious and so evident. Your ministry is like many other ministries. You have parking lot people, and you have greeters, and you have people that do the lawn, and you have so many different people, and it's important for everybody to find their place. And, if God puts somebody in Liberty Baptist Church or Fellowship Baptist Church, He put them there because they have something to bring to the ministry table. And I think we have to help them, find out what that is and encourage them to get involved. So I think involvement is huge. I've seen families that have gotten saved or maybe come in from a different type of ministry and not really get involved. And then I've seen people get saved or come in to the fellowship family and just get plugged in. And there is so much of a difference too. And so I think involvement, dependability, just really the ordinary things.
That was really good. We're getting close to the 1 hour mark, which is what I was shooting for. Our Wednesday night service is generally a 1 hour service. And these last 5 minutes or so, my thought is, if you have any biblical challenge or biblical principles, if you will, maybe something that you have said or you would want to say to your church family. This is a unique season. We've been away from each other for 6 weeks, and it might go another week or 2 or 3 or 4. We don't know exactly what this is all going to look like. And as a pastor, we're all walking through this as people, as Christians. We're walking through this for the first time. And I'll maybe have both of you take a couple of minutes. Are there some specific, for this season, during the shutdown and walking out of the shutdown, things, Pastor Prater, we'll start with you, that you would say to your church family, and then by extension to our church family, here's what I hope you are doing and are thinking and are your thought process in this season as Christians and coming out of this season?
I shared this with our church as I closed our services last Sunday morning, that don't get used to this. Don't let this become the norm. Going to church in your pajamas, tuning in when it's convenient for you. I said this. Online worship is like kissing a picture of your wife. It's just not the same. And it's not intended to be the same. And we should never say, oh, well, I get as much out of, going to church online as I do in church. There's a problem there. God still wants us to assemble. That's his picture. That's why it's a body. That's why we're encouraged to not forsake the assembling of ourselves together. And so if there was anything I wanted our people to understand, and hopefully your people to understand, is don't let this become normal. Don't let this become okay. We need face-to-face fellowship, corporate worship, corporate singing together. And I don't want to embarrass him, but I'd encourage any church member to get online, fellowshipfamily.org, find the message that Pastor Tyler preached Sunday night on 1 Thessalonians. It was so timely about the importance of assembling together. He didn't make anything up. It was right there in the text. It was incredible, God's timing. And I would encourage any church member, if it's all right with your pastor, to tune in, to find that message online and listen to it. It just so incredibly hit home.
I wish I would have known about that before, and then I could have gone on and got the notes, and I could have preached it here. Man, I missed it. No, I'd encourage you. I'm going to go back and listen to that. And what's the website? Fellowship Family?
Fellowshipfamily.org.
Fellowshipfamily.org. If you're Googling the church, Fellowship Baptist Church, Liberal, Kansas. Go listen to that message. Pastor Tyler is a powerful Bible preacher. Pastor Tyler, any closing thoughts of what maybe some stuff you said Sunday night, or some things you would want to say to your church family that in turn would help our church family?
I preached out of 1 Thessalonians, the end of chapter 2 and all of chapter 3, where Paul has been separated from the church that he planted there in Thessalonica. And he was only there for a few weeks, a little bit longer, before he got ran out by the local authorities. And as a pastor, he was so concerned about how they were doing. And the text is all about how the loving people and wanting to be together with them go hand in hand. Even though Satan works to hinder our being together, we still have to be willing to pay whatever cost is necessary to get together. And Paul, in his case, was willing to pay the cost of sending Timothy, his fellow brother in the ministry and his co-laborer, the MVP of his missionary team, and be left at Athens alone so that Timothy could go and minister to those people and be together. And really what it taught us is that Satan knows how valuable it is for God's people to be together. And so like he hindered Paul from going back to Thessalonica, he's often going to do whatever he can to hinder our being together. And like Paul, we have to be willing to pay the cost, whatever that might be, to get together. And there's a lot more I could share about that, but basically the application boiled down to this, and I think it would help your church to ask themselves this question is what about being apart is going to enhance your being together in the future? And so this is a great time for us to reflect on the value of being together. And maybe there are some things that over the course of assembling for so long you've taken for granted, and you need to reevaluate and say, what do I need to reprioritize? For some in our church, it's I'm going to come on Sunday morning and Sunday night. For some, it's I'm going to come on a midweek service, even though I get out of work just 30 minutes before church starts. I'm going to pay the cost to gather because we don't know how long we'll be able to do that. And for some, it's that I'm going to go and I'm not just going to focus on myself there and serve me and bless me. I'm going to go and encourage and strengthen the faith of others there. We need to evaluate our assembling together and why we do it, and how prioritized it is, and how focused, committed we are to it. And we need to let this time of being apart refuel and revive some things in our life and our approach to assembling together. So what can be enhanced about being together in the future from being apart for so long during this time?
Awesome. Thank you, men, very, very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your friendship and example to me. And I'm glad that the Lord has allowed our paths to cross and allowed my life to be influenced by yours. We love you guys, and look forward to seeing online how God's using you and how we continue to walk through this crazy season. Thanks again for everything, guys.
Lord bless you. Thank you, Brother Ryan. Love you guys.
All right. Liberty Baptist Church, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. And a reminder, Sunday morning, I'll be back in Acts chapter number 10, continuing in our series on next, when God opens a new chapter of gospel impact. We saw last week as God opened the gospel to the Gentiles. I hope you'll tune in 10 o'clock Sunday morning. Sunday night, it'll be a live service. I'll be here, and we'll have Toby England coming in answering tough questions. We'll be looking at answering questions about defending our faith and things of that nature. And I hope you'll plan to be here. That's at 5 o'clock. So Sunday kids class at 9, morning service at 10, and 5 o'clock. And as they mentioned, give some thought and consideration about how is our assembling together going to be different because of our time apart. I hope we're going to be a stronger church, a more focused church as we move forward for the glory of God. You're a wonderful church. We love you. Thank God for you. Have a great rest of the week. Contact us if we can do anything for you during these days. God bless you. Bye now.